Hello there, my sleepy citizens. Tonight, we journey into the shadowed streets of Gotham City, where mysteries lurk and the Dark Knight stands vigilant against the forces of chaos. We bring you tales of Batman, uncovering different sides of the man behind the mask. And as our journey through these stories winds down, a calm ambience of Gotham's streets will carry you throughout the night, bringing you to restful sleep without interruptions from any ads. If you enjoy these tales, please be sure to give us a like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what story you'd like to hear next. But for now, let's get cozy and step into the world of Gotham. Fog rolled through Gotham like a living thing, transforming the familiar city into something ancient and mysterious. It crept between buildings with deliberate patience, muffling sounds and softening hard edges until even Batman found himself moving more carefully through streets he knew by heart. The thick mist seemed to absorb light itself, turning street lamps into distant halos, and reducing the towering skyscrapers to ghostly suggestions against the night sky. From his position atop Wayne Tower, Batman surveyed a city made strange by weather. The fog had arrived 3 nights ago with unusual suddenness, rolling in from the harbor with an almost supernatural density. Weather reports called it a rare atmospheric phenomenon, but Batman had learned to be suspicious of anything in Gotham that seemed too convenient, too perfectly timed for criminal purposes. Master Bruce, Alfred's voice came through the cowl with its usual calm precision. I'm monitoring emergency frequencies, 3rd night of heavy fog, and we're seeing an unusual pattern in the 911 calls. The butler's decades of experience made him invaluable for spotting anomalies that others might miss. Noise complaints, specifically. Citizens reporting strange sounds echoing through the fog. Voices, mechanical noises, things that seem to move from location to location without any visible source. Batman's enhanced vision struggled against the dense mist, even with the cowl's sophisticated optics. The fog seemed to have its own intelligence, flowing around obstacles and pooling in unexpected places. What kind of sounds, Alfred? Difficult to classify. Some describe it as machinery, others as voices speaking in riddles. The pattern suggests coordination rather than random urban noise. Alfred's typing was audible in the background, cross-referencing data with his characteristic thoroughness. Most intriguingly, several witnesses mentioned that the sounds seemed to come from directions where there are no visible sources, as if the fog itself were speaking. The observation sent a chill through Batman that had nothing to do with the night air. In Gotham, phenomena that seemed supernatural often had very human architects behind them, and there were few criminals in the city who understood the power of psychological manipulation better than Edward Nygma. The Riddler, Batman said quietly, the name carrying certainty born of experience. He's using the fog as cover for something larger. The criminal's genius lay not in brute force, but in understanding how environment could amplify fear and confusion. With visibility reduced to mere feet, Gotham had become the perfect stage for his particular brand of intellectual terrorism. As if summoned by Batman's recognition, speakers throughout the city crackled to life with a familiar, mocking voice. The Riddler's distinctive tones echoed through the fog-shrouded streets, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Greetings, citizens of my temporary domain. Nygma's voice carried through the public address systems with theatrical precision. For 3 nights, I have been your unseen conductor, orchestrating a symphony of confusion. But tonight, the real performance begins. His laugh drifted through the mist like a living thing, bouncing off buildings and creating false echoes that made tracking his location impossible. Batman descended from Wayne Tower with fluid grace, his cape barely disturbing the fog as he moved through the transformed cityscape. Each footstep seemed unnaturally loud in the muffled atmosphere, and he found himself adjusting his movement patterns instinctively. The fog demanded a different kind of stealth, one based on sound rather than shadow. The first riddle, Nigma's voice continued, now seeming to come from the east, concerns a place where voices rise to heaven, yet no prayers are spoken, where metal tongues sing without breath, and time itself keeps rhythm. Find this place before the hour strikes, or my little surprises will remind Gotham that not all mysteries have pleasant solutions. Alfred. Analysis. Batman sub-vocalized as he moved through streets that had become alien landscape. The fog transformed familiar intersections into mazes, making navigation a careful process of listening and careful observation. Cross-referencing architectural databases. Alfred replied promptly. Voices rising, metal tongues singing. The clues point to bell towers or carry-ons. Gotham has 17 major bell installations, but given the acoustic properties he's exploiting, we should focus on those with the best sound projection. Batman paused at what should have been a familiar corner, momentarily disoriented by how completely the fog had transformed the urban landscape. Even with his enhanced hearing, sounds seemed to bend and shift in unexpected ways. A car engine that should have been blocks away sounded close enough to touch, while his own footsteps created echoes that suggested architectural features that weren't there. "The Cathedral of St. Bartholomew," he said, understanding clicking into place. Largest bell tower in the city, and its carry-on system could be modified to broadcast, but Alfred, check the timing. When he says, "before the hour strikes," current time is 11:17 p.m., Alfred confirmed. If he means the next full hour, that gives us 43 minutes. But knowing Mr. Nigma's flair for dramatic timing, he might mean midnight, which would provide a more appropriate deadline for his theatrical sensibilities. Batman altered course, navigating by memory and the subtle acoustic cues that the fog couldn't completely muffle. The city's sounds were muted but not eliminated. Traffic patterns created a low background hum that helped establish direction, and the fog seemed to carry certain frequencies while absorbing others. It was like moving through a world where the normal rules of perception had been subtly but significantly altered. The Cathedral of St. Bartholomew emerged from the fog gradually, its Gothic spires becoming visible only when Batman was close enough to touch the stonework. The ancient building seemed even more imposing in the mist, its architectural details creating shadows within shadows. The bell tower rose into the fog like a finger pointing at mysteries hidden in the sky. "Movement detected." Alfred's voice carried new urgency. Thermal signatures suggest someone has been working in the bell tower recently. Also, I'm picking up electronic modifications to the carry-on system, additional transmitters, signal boosters, something that could turn the entire structure into a massive broadcasting antenna. Batman scaled the cathedral's exterior with practiced ease, the fog providing perfect cover for his ascent. The ancient stonework was slick with moisture, requiring extra care, but it also muffled any sounds his movement might have created. As he climbed, he could hear the subtle hum of electronic equipment that definitely hadn't been part of the original 19th century construction. The bell chamber was empty of human presence, but filled with Nigma's technological modifications. Banks of speakers had been positioned to work with the tower's natural acoustics, while computer equipment monitored sound propagation throughout the fog-covered city. It was an impressive setup. The Riddler had essentially turned Gotham's most prominent bell tower into a sophisticated audio laboratory. "Ingenious," Alfred observed as Batman transmitted visual data. He's using the fog's acoustic properties to create false sound sources throughout the city, speakers placed at strategic locations coordinated with the natural sound-carrying properties of the weather pattern. No wonder witnesses couldn't identify where the sounds were coming from. Batman examined the setup more closely, looking for both the immediate threat and clues to Nigma's larger plan. There, he said, identifying a digital timer connected to what was clearly an explosive device. 47 minutes and counting. But this isn't the main event. It's too obvious, too easy to find. A misdirection? Alfred suggested. Or perhaps the first movement in a larger composition. Before Batman could respond, the speakers throughout the cathedral came alive with Nigma's voice. But this time, it seemed to be coming from multiple directions at once. Ah, Batman, I wondered when you'd arrive at the most obvious location. Tell me, do you appreciate the acoustics? I've spent considerable time optimizing them for tonight's performance. What's the real target, Nigma? Batman spoke aloud, knowing the Riddler would have monitoring equipment in place. Direct questions are so disappointing, came the reply, the voice seeming to circle the bell chamber like a living thing. Where's your appreciation for the subtle arts? Very well, since you insist on rushing towards solutions rather than savoring mysteries, here's your second riddle. I stand guard where the city's voice emerges, yet speak only through others' words. Citizens seek me for guidance, but I offer only questions in return. My face changes with each passing moment, yet I never move from my appointed place. Batman was already analyzing the clue as Nigma's laughter faded into the fog. Alfred, news broadcasts, information displays, something that communicates with the city but doesn't originate content. The Times Square information kiosk, Alfred replied immediately. Digital news displays, updated continuously, positioned where maximum numbers of people would see it. And Master Bruce, I'm detecting increased electronic activity in that area. Multiple devices coming online simultaneously. Batman secured the cathedral's bomb with a small device that would disrupt its detonation sequence, then began his descent. The fog seemed even thicker now, if that were possible, turning the city into a landscape of suggestions and half-glimpsed shapes. Navigation required careful attention to subtle acoustic landmarks, the way certain architectural patterns, the distant sound of harbor activity, the way certain architectural features affected wind flow. As he moved through the transformed city, Batman found himself adjusting not just his navigation techniques, but his entire approach to urban movement. The fog demanded patience, careful listening, trust in senses other than sight. It was a reminder that even someone with his skills could benefit from slowing down, from paying attention to subtleties, usually overwhelmed by more obvious sensory input. Master Bruce, Alfred's voice carried concern. I'm monitoring emergency frequencies. Reports of strange sounds are increasing. Citizens describing voices in the fog that seem to be calling their names. Mechanical noises that move through the streets like living things. The psychological effect is significant. People are staying indoors, avoiding areas where the fog is thickest. Exactly what Nigma wants, Batman replied, understanding the psychological warfare aspect of the Riddler's plan. Isolation, confusion, making people dependent on any voice that seems to offer clarity. When fear reaches the right level, his broadcasts will seem like salvation rather than threat. The Times Square area emerged from the fog like a technological oasis in a natural desert. Digital displays glowed through the mist with otherworldly intensity, their light creating halos and false depths in the thick air. But something was wrong with the usual commercial displays. Instead of advertisements and news updates, they showed a series of question marks that pulsed in a hypnotic rhythm. Batman approached cautiously, his enhanced vision scanning for both obvious threats and subtle anomalies. The area should have been busy even at this hour, but the fog had driven most people indoors. Only a few figures moved through the mist, and their movements seemed oddly purposeful, as if they were following specific instructions. Alfred, are you seeing this? The people in the square, they're not moving randomly. Confirmed. Their movement patterns suggest they're following audio cues, probably through earpieces or small speakers. Master Bruce, I believe Mr. Nigma is conducting a live experiment in crowd control through acoustic manipulation. As if to confirm Alfred's analysis, the digital displays shifted to show new text. Citizens of Gotham, you have been chosen for a demonstration of responsive urban planning. Follow the voice in the fog and find your way to clarity. Ignore the voice and discover what happens when communities fail to solve problems together. Batman realized the true scope of Nigma's plan. This wasn't just about bombs or riddles. It was about demonstrating how easily a population could be controlled through fear and carefully orchestrated confusion. The people moving through the fog weren't random victims. They were test subjects in an experiment designed to prove the Riddler's intellectual superiority over both Batman and the city itself. The third riddle, Nigma's voice emerged from speakers hidden throughout the square, involves a choice, Batman. Save the individuals who have chosen to trust my guidance or prevent the larger demonstration I have planned for midnight. You cannot do both. The fog that conceals also constrains. Choose wisely, because in exactly 37 minutes, Gotham will learn whether its protector understands the difference between heroism and mere reaction. Batman studied the controlled crowd, noting how they moved in response to audio cues only they could hear. Whatever Nigma was telling them through their hidden receivers, it was compelling enough to override their natural caution about wandering through fog-shrouded streets at night. They looked calm, almost peaceful, which made them more dangerous to themselves than if they had been obviously afraid. Alfred, I need you to trace the audio signals controlling these people. Can you identify what they're hearing? Working on it, came the immediate reply. The signals are encrypted, but Master Bruce, I'm getting fragments. He's telling them they're part of a solution, that by following his voice they're helping to solve a city-wide problem. He's making them feel important, chosen, part of something larger than themselves. The psychological manipulation was elegant in its simplicity. Nigma wasn't threatening these people, he was making them feel special, giving their wandering through the fog a sense of purpose and community. They would resist rescue because they believed they were already being saved. Time pressure, multiple objectives, psychological manipulation of civilians, Batman analyzed aloud. Classic Riddler methodology. He wants me to make mistakes by rushing, to choose reactive solutions instead of understanding the deeper pattern. Indeed, Alfred agreed. But Master Bruce, we have 28 minutes until his midnight deadline. Whatever his ultimate demonstration is intended to be, stopping it may require understanding achieved through patience we may not have. Batman moved through the square, studying the controlled crowd while avoiding direct interaction that might disrupt their programmed behavior. The fog provided perfect cover for observation, and he began to see the subtle but sophisticated nature of Nigma's experiment. The people weren't just following random instructions. They were being positioned according to some larger geometric pattern, their movements creating a kind of human diagram across the urban landscape. It's a map, he realized suddenly. Alfred, plot their positions from above. They're not just wandering, they're creating a visual representation of something. Extraordinary. Alfred's voice carried genuine admiration for the technical achievement. You're correct. When plotted from above, their positions outline the street layout of Gotham's financial district. But Master Bruce, what's particularly interesting is that they're not just creating a map. Batman felt the familiar sensation of puzzle pieces clicking into place. The midnight demonstration. He's not planning something here in Times Square. He's using these people to show me where his real target is located. The fog, the acoustic manipulation, the time pressure, it's all designed to make me focus on the wrong location while he prepares something in the financial district. But which building? Alfred asked. The human map they're creating includes dozens of structures. Before Batman could respond, a new voice cut through the fog, not from speakers, but from a figure approaching through the mist. An elderly man with the distinctive white cane of the blind moved with surprising confidence through the obscured landscape, his navigation skills apparently unaffected by the weather. "Excuse me," the man said, his voice carrying the trained projection of someone accustomed to being heard clearly. "Are you the one they call Batman?" "I've been listening to the sounds in the fog for 3 nights, and I believe I understand something important about what's happening." Batman approached carefully, recognizing that this unexpected encounter might be another element of Nigma's plan. "What's your name?" "Thomas Kellerman," the man replied. "I was choir master at St. Bartholomew's for 30 years before my retirement. Lost my sight 5 years ago, but not my ear for acoustics." He turned his head slightly, listening to sounds that Batman's enhanced hearing could barely detect. "The voice that's been speaking through the city, I know it from somewhere. More importantly, I understand what he's doing with the sound propagation." Batman prompted, noting that the controlled crowd in the square had begun moving in a new pattern. "It's about harmonic resonance," Kellerman said, his voice carrying the authority of expertise. "Certain frequencies can be amplified through architectural features, not just bell towers, but the specific acoustic properties of different building materials. Gothic stonework creates different resonance patterns than modern steel and glass. This voice, this Riddler, he's not just broadcasting randomly, he's tuning his transmissions to specific buildings." Batman felt understanding dawn. Buildings that would amplify his signal in different ways. Exactly. And there's one building in the financial district with particularly unusual acoustic properties. The old Gotham Mercantile Bank. Built in 1887 with a unique combination of materials, it creates acoustic anomalies that architects have been studying for decades. If someone wanted to broadcast a signal that would carry throughout the entire city, that building would be the ideal transmission point. "Alfred," Batman subvocalized, "cross-intersection the Gotham Mercantile Bank with recent Riddler activity." "Master Bruce," Alfred's voice carried excitement, "that building houses the city's emergency broadcast system backup servers. If Mr. Nigma gained control of that facility, he could override every electronic communication device in Gotham simultaneously." The true scope of Nigma's plan became clear. This wasn't about individual riddles or even controlling small groups of people. He was planning to take control of Gotham's entire communication infrastructure, using the fog as cover for the ultimate demonstration of his intellectual superiority. The ability to speak directly into every electronic device in the city at once. "Mr. Kellerman," Batman said, "I need you to help me with something. Can you identify the specific frequency patterns the Riddler is using?" The elderly man tilted his head, listening with the concentrated attention of someone whose hearing had become supernaturally acute. "Complex harmonics, but yes, I can isolate the bass frequency. More importantly, I can tell you how to disrupt it. Every acoustic system has a resonance point that, when precisely matched, causes interference rather than amplification. Batman helped Kellerman navigate to a safer location while absorbing his technical expertise. The man's knowledge of acoustic engineering was exactly what was needed to counter Nigma's sophisticated audio manipulation. Sometimes the best counter to high-tech criminal activity was old-fashioned expertise applied in unexpected ways. 19 minutes until midnight, Alfred reminded them. Master Bruce, I'm tracking unusual electronic activity throughout the financial district. It appears Mr. Nigma has been preparing this for longer than just the 3 nights of fog. The preliminary work has been going on for weeks. Batman was already moving toward the financial district, using acoustic landmarks and the subtle light patterns that managed to penetrate the fog. Behind him, the controlled crowd in Times Square continued their strange geometric dance, but he now understood they were merely a distraction, albeit a sophisticated one that had served to demonstrate Nigma's capabilities while misdirecting attention. The fog seemed even thicker in the narrow streets of the financial district, where tall buildings created canyon-like passages that trapped and concentrated the mist. Sound behaved strangely here, echoing in unexpected ways and creating acoustic illusions that made navigation treacherous. Batman found himself relying more heavily on Alfred's guidance and his own memorized knowledge of the area's layout. The Gotham Mercantile Bank building shows significant thermal activity, Alfred reported, also detecting multiple electronic signatures, broadcasting equipment, computer systems, and what appears to be Master Bruce. There are explosive devices positioned throughout the building's communication array. Not to destroy it, Batman realized. To make sure no one can stop his broadcast once it begins. Nigma isn't planning to destroy the communication system. He's planning to make it permanently his. The bank building emerged from the fog like a monument to earlier architectural ambitions. Its combination of traditional stonework and modern technological additions created exactly the kind of hybrid acoustic environment that Kellerman had described. Batman could see lights in windows that should have been dark, and could hear the subtle hum of electronic equipment running at full capacity. Master Bruce, Alfred's voice carried urgency. I'm detecting the beginning of signal amplification. Mr. Nigma is preparing to begin his broadcast. Also, the explosive devices are on a timer. If his broadcast is interrupted, they'll detonate and destroy the entire communication array. Batman entered the building through a maintenance access that the fog had concealed perfectly. Inside, the acoustic properties that Kellerman had described were immediately apparent. Even whispered sounds seemed to carry and amplify in unexpected ways. Nigma had chosen his location with typical precision. The building's upper floors had been converted into a sophisticated broadcasting center, with equipment that transformed the structure into a massive transmission antenna. Nigma himself stood at the center of it all, surrounded by monitors showing feeds from throughout the fog-covered city. He turned as Batman entered, his expression showing satisfaction rather than surprise. Punctual as always, Batman, and just in time to witness the culmination of 3 months of preparation. Nigma gestured to the displays around him. Observe, a city rendered helpless by something as simple as weather, its citizens isolated and afraid, desperate for any voice that offers guidance and clarity. The fog isn't natural, Batman said, noting the timer displays showing less than 8 minutes until midnight. Of course not, a simple matter of atmospheric manipulation. Silver iodide dispensers positioned throughout the harbor, activated in carefully timed sequence to create unprecedented fog density. The real achievement is how I've used the natural human response to such conditions. Nigma's voice carried his characteristic intellectual pride. Fear, isolation, desperate need for guidance, all perfectly predictable reactions to sensory deprivation. Batman studied the room's setup, looking for ways to disrupt the broadcast without triggering the explosive failsafes. What's the end game, Nigma? You take control of the city's communications, then what? Then I prove a point that needed proving, the Riddler replied, his fingers dancing over control surfaces. And intellectual superiority trumps physical prowess. That understanding systems matters more than individual heroics. In 4 minutes, I will speak directly to every electronic device in Gotham. Every phone, every computer, every emergency system. And what I tell them will demonstrate that the city's supposed protector is merely reactive, not truly protective. Unless someone stops you, Batman pointed out, still analyzing the room's technical setup. Ah, but that's the beauty of the design, Nigma smiled. Stop me, and the explosives destroy the city's entire emergency communication system. Allow me to proceed, and I prove that Gotham's faith in Batman is misplaced. Either way, the citizens learn that their safety depends on intellectual problem-solving, rather than dramatic gesture. Batman activated his cow's communication system. Alfred, patch me through to Mr. Kellerman. I need his acoustic expertise for a very specific application. Master Bruce, came Kellerman's voice, surprisingly clear despite the building's interference. I've been listening to the electronic activity from here. The frequency patterns suggest he's using the building's natural resonance to amplify his signal. But if you can access the building's original bell system, there is no bell system, Batman said, scanning the room for alternatives. Actually, there is, Kellerman replied with certainty. The Gotham Mercantile was built with a small carillon in its upper tower. Most people have forgotten about it, but the mechanism is still there. If you can activate it at the precise counter frequency to his broadcast system, Batman located the forgotten carillon system in a sealed chamber above Nigma Broadcasting Center. The mechanical bells were corroded with age but still functional. More importantly, they were connected to the same acoustic features that Nigma was exploiting for his transmission system. 2 minutes, Alfred warned. Master Bruce, Mr. Nigma is beginning his preliminary broadcast. I'm seeing signal propagation throughout the fog. Citizens of Gotham, Nigma's voice began broadcasting through every electronic device in the city. Tonight, you learn a valuable lesson about the difference between security and the illusion of security. Your protector is in this building with me, faced with a choice that demonstrates the limitations of heroic thinking. Batman activated the carillon at the precise frequency Kellerman had calculated. The ancient bells began chiming, their tones creating interference patterns that disrupted Nigma's carefully calibrated broadcast system. The Riddler's voice became distorted, then faded into electronic static as the competing acoustic waves cancelled each other out. Impossible, Nigma shouted over the sound of the bells. I calculated every acoustic variable in this building. You calculated the modern variables, Batman replied, watching as the monitoring displays showed system failures cascading through Nigma's setup. But you forgot about the original architecture. The fog outside began dissipating as Nigma's atmospheric manipulation equipment lost power, along with his broadcasting systems. Without the artificial enhancement, natural air currents began clearing the mist that had blanketed Gotham for 3 nights. The explosives, deprived of their controlling signals, shut down safely as their fail-safe systems activated. Master Bruce, Alfred's voice carried relief. The emergency broadcast systems are coming back online. Also, GCPD is en route. Apparently, Mr. Kellerman contacted them with your location. Batman secured Nigma as the sounds of approaching sirens became audible through the clearing fog. The Riddler's expression showed frustrated respect rather than defeat. He understood that he had been outmaneuvered by a combination of detective work and expertise he hadn't anticipated. Kellerman, Nigma said thoughtfully, the blind choirmaster. I researched the building's acoustic properties extensively, but I failed to account for human expertise that predated my arrival. He looked at Batman with something approaching admiration. You used my own methodology against me, gathering information from unexpected sources, understanding systems more thoroughly than their apparent controllers. As GCPD took Nigma into custody, Batman stood in the clearing fog, watching Gotham's familiar skyline emerge from 3 nights of concealment. The city looked somehow renewed, as if the mist had washed away accumulated grime and revealed architectural details usually lost in urban haze. Thomas Kellerman appeared at his side, guided by the sound of Batman's breathing. "Quite an evening," the elderly man said with satisfaction. "It's been years since I had the opportunity to use my acoustic knowledge for something so dramatic." "Your expertise made the difference," Batman acknowledged. Nigma's plan was technically perfect, but he couldn't account for knowledge that existed outside his research parameters. "The same mistake many intelligent people make," Kellerman observed. "DCB assume that if they can't find information in databases or technical manuals, it doesn't exist. But some knowledge lives only in human memory, passed down through experience rather than documentation." Over the following days, as Gotham returned to normal visibility and routine, Batman reflected on the lessons embedded in Nigma's elaborate scheme. The Riddler had demonstrated real insight into how environment could be used to manipulate behavior, how fear and isolation could make people vulnerable to any voice that seemed to offer clarity. But he had also revealed the limitations of purely intellectual approaches to complex problems. "The fog has completely cleared," Alfred observed during one of their post-incident analyses. "Weather services confirm that without the artificial enhancement, natural air currents have restored normal visibility throughout the city. But the psychological impact will linger," Batman noted. Nigma proved how quickly familiar environments can become alien, how dependent people are on sensory information they usually take for granted. "He also proved something else," Alfred added thoughtfully, "that community knowledge, the expertise of people like Mr. Kellerman, remains one of our most valuable resources. No criminal, however intelligent, can account for every piece of human experience that might be brought to bear against their plans." Batman made a final patrol through the fog-free city, noting how different everything looked with normal visibility restored. Gotham's harsh edges were clearly defined again, its architectural complexities fully visible, rather than suggested by mist and shadow. But the experience of navigating by sound and touch, of relying on expertise that couldn't be Googled or hacked, had left him with renewed appreciation for the subtle skills that often mattered more than obvious capabilities. The bell tower of St. Bartholomew's Cathedral was clearly visible now, its spire reaching towards stars no longer hidden by artificial fog. Batman paused there briefly, listening to the natural acoustic environment that Nigma had so skillfully manipulated. Even without enhancement, the city had its own voice, a complex harmony of traffic and wind, machinery and human activity, all the sounds that made Gotham unique among the world's urban landscapes. "An interesting few days," he said to Alfred through the cowl, "reminded me that sometimes the best counter to sophisticated technology is sophisticated listening." "Indeed, Master Bruce. Though I suspect Mr. Nigma learned something as well. That intellectual superiority means nothing without wisdom about what cannot be predicted or controlled." As Batman concluded his patrol, the city settled into its normal nighttime rhythms. The fog was gone, but its lessons remained. about the power of environment to shape perception, about the importance of community knowledge that existed beyond official databases, and about the value of patience and careful listening in a world increasingly dominated by the demand for immediate, visible results. The following evening brought clear skies and crisp air that seemed almost unnaturally transparent after 3 nights of opacity. Batman found himself moving differently through the restored cityscape, more aware of sounds that had been muffled or transformed by the fog. The experience had heightened his acoustic sensitivity in ways that would serve him well in future investigations. Master Bruce, Alfred's voice carried through the cowl as Batman paused on a rooftop overlooking the financial district. I've been analyzing the psychological reports from citizens who experienced Mr. Nigma's fog manipulation. The results are illuminating. The Gotham Mercantile Bank building stood clearly visible now, its unusual architecture more apparent without the concealing mist. Batman could see how the combination of traditional stonework and modern additions created the acoustic anomalies that had made it perfect for Nigma's purposes. Architecture as both art and engineering, a reminder that the city's builders had often embedded functionality within beauty. What kind of psychological effects? Batman asked, settling into a comfortable observation position. The night air carried sounds with remarkable clarity after the muffled atmosphere of the fog days. Increased social cohesion among neighborhoods, Alfred replied, his tone suggesting surprise at the data. Apparently, when people couldn't rely on visual cues, they began talking to each other more, checking on elderly neighbors, sharing information about safe routes, coordinating informal assistance networks. Mr. Nigma's attempt to isolate and control the population actually brought many communities closer together. Batman smiled slightly within his cowl. It was typical of criminal masterminds to underestimate the resilience and adaptability of ordinary people. Nigma had calculated the fear and confusion his fog would create, but he hadn't anticipated how Gotham's citizens would respond by strengthening their connections to each other. There's more, Alfred continued. Mr. Kellerman has been contacted by the mayor's office. They want him to consult on improving the city's emergency communication systems, specifically how to make them more accessible to citizens with visual impairments. His expertise in acoustic engineering is apparently being recognized as a valuable resource. The irony was perfect. Nigma's scheme, designed to demonstrate intellectual superiority over community wisdom, had instead highlighted the value of knowledge that existed within the community itself. Thomas Kellerman's transition from victim of circumstance to civic consultant embodied exactly the kind of human adaptability that pure logic often failed to account for. Batman descended from his observation point and began moving through the clear streets, noting how different familiar patrol routes felt without the fog's acoustic dampening. Every footstep, every movement of his cape, every distant sound seemed sharper and more defined. The city's normal sensory richness had been restored, but his awareness of its subtle variations had been permanently enhanced. Near the harbor, where Nigma's atmospheric manipulation equipment had been positioned, Batman encountered workers dismantling the silver iodide dispersal systems. The devices were sophisticated pieces of weather modification technology, their placement carefully calculated to create maximum fog density with minimum detectability, environmental crime on a city-wide scale. Yet another example of how modern criminals could exploit natural systems for unnatural purposes. The equipment analysis reveals something interesting, Alfred noted as Batman examined one of the dispersal units. Mr. Nigma didn't develop this technology himself. It was purchased through intermediaries from legitimate atmospheric research companies. He turned tools designed to help farmers deal with drought into weapons for urban psychological warfare. Dual-use technology, Batman observed, understanding the broader implications, scientific advances that can serve constructive or destructive purposes, depending on the user's intentions. It was a reminder that vigilance needed to extend beyond traditional criminal activity to encompass the misuse of otherwise beneficial innovations. The harbor itself looked different in the clear air, its industrial complexity fully visible after nights of mysterious, half-glimpsed shapes. Fog had made the waterfront seem ancient and mysterious. Clarity revealed it as thoroughly modern and functional. Both perspectives were true, Batman reflected. The city contained multitudes, different aspects revealed by changing conditions. A small group of people had gathered on one of the piers, and Batman recognized them as some of the citizens who had been part of Nigma's controlled crowd in Times Square. They were talking quietly among themselves, their conversation carrying clearly across the water in the still air. Strangest thing was how peaceful it felt, one woman was saying. Even when we couldn't see where we were going, following that voice made everything seem purposeful, important. I keep thinking about that, a man replied. How good it felt to be part of something larger, even when we didn't understand what it was. Makes you wonder about the difference between being led and being guided. Batman listened from the shadows, understanding that these people were processing an experience that had been both manipulative and, in some ways, genuinely meaningful. Nigma's psychological engineering had tapped into real human needs, for purpose, for community, for guidance during times of uncertainty. The fact that his motives were selfish didn't negate the authenticity of those needs. Master Bruce, Alfred's voice interrupted his observations. I'm receiving reports of unusual acoustic phenomena in the old industrial district. Not threatening, apparently, but curious. Sounds that seem to be coming from abandoned buildings, but with no apparent source. Batman altered his patrol route toward the industrial area, intrigued by the possibility that Nigma's fog experiment had revealed other acoustic anomalies throughout the city. The old industrial district was filled with buildings from Gotham's manufacturing heyday, structures with unique architectural features that might create unexpected sound effects under the right atmospheric conditions. The first building he investigated was a former textile mill. Its vast interior spaces designed to accommodate heavy machinery that had been removed decades ago. Without the fog to absorb and redirect sound, the empty spaces created remarkable acoustic effects. Whispered words seemed to travel impossible distances, while louder sounds created echoes that lasted far longer than architectural logic suggested. Fascinating, Alfred commented, as Batman explored the building's sound properties. These structures were designed for industrial acoustics, managing noise from machinery, creating communication systems that worked over factory floor distances. Without their intended contents, they'd become accidental concert halls. Batman found evidence that other people had discovered these acoustic properties, makeshift seating arrangements, signs of recent occupancy, even some simple musical instruments left behind. The fog nights had apparently driven some citizens to seek shelter in these abandoned spaces, where they had discovered the building's hidden musical potential. An unintended consequence of Mr. Nigma's scheme, Alfred observed. His fog forced people to explore parts of the city they normally avoided, leading to discoveries that might benefit the community long after his criminal purposes have been forgotten. Batman continued his exploration of the industrial district, finding similar acoustic treasures in building after building. A former brewery with fermentation chambers that created perfect reverb. A defunct printing plant where the arrangement of support pillars turned the entire space into a massive organ pipe. An abandoned automotive factory where the loading dock areas had been naturally designed to amplify human voices. Master Bruce, Alfred's voice carried excitement. I'm cross-referencing these buildings with city planning documents. Several of them are scheduled for demolition to make way for modern development. But if their acoustic properties were properly documented and preserved, they could serve new purposes. Batman finished the thought. Community centers, performance spaces, places where the city's musical heritage could continue rather than being lost to progress. The idea appealed to him on multiple levels. Gotham was a city that often seemed to destroy its past in pursuit of an uncertain future, but these buildings represented opportunities to preserve valuable features while adapting to changing needs. Architecture as continuity rather than replacement, much like his own work protecting the city by honoring its complexity rather than trying to simplify it. Near dawn, Batman made his way back toward the cathedral district, where the fog had first revealed the scope of Nigma's plan. St. Bartholomew's bell tower stood clearly visible against the lightening sky, its carry-on system restored to normal operation after its crucial role in disrupting the Riddler's broadcast. Thomas Kellerman was there, as Batman had somehow expected, standing in the small park adjacent to the cathedral and listening to the morning's first bell chimes with the concentrated attention of a master craftsman evaluating his work. "Good morning," the elderly man said as Batman approached, apparently recognizing his distinctive footstep pattern. "I have been coming here each morning since the fog cleared, listening to how the bells sound in normal atmospheric conditions. Remarkable how much difference the air density makes." "What brings you here so early?" Batman asked, settling into a comfortable conversation rhythm that felt natural after their collaboration during the crisis. "Partly nostalgia," Kellerman admitted, "but mostly curiosity about what else the fog might have revealed. 3 nights of unusual acoustic conditions. I suspect there are discoveries waiting throughout the city for anyone with ears to appreciate them." Batman shared his findings from the industrial district, describing the accidental concert halls and natural amplification systems he had discovered. Kellerman listened with growing enthusiasm, his expertise allowing him to understand the architectural acoustics Batman described. "Extraordinary," the choirmaster said when Batman finished. "You've identified a network of acoustic resources that could transform how this city thinks about public spaces and community gathering. The fog was meant to isolate people, but it actually revealed connections that have been hidden in plain sight. Would you be interested in documenting these spaces?" Batman asked. "Working with city planners to preserve them?" Kellerman's smile suggested the idea had already occurred to him. "I've been thinking about exactly that. My forced retirement gave me time I didn't know how to use, but this experience has shown me that my expertise might be more valuable than I realized. Gotham's acoustic heritage deserves better than accidental discovery." As the cathedral bells completed their morning sequence, Batman reflected on how completely the aftermath of Nigma's scheme had contradicted its intended purpose. What was meant to demonstrate the futility of community cooperation had instead revealed hidden community resources. What was designed to prove intellectual superiority over collective wisdom had instead shown how individual expertise gained meaning through connection with others. "Master Bruce," Alfred's voice carried the warm satisfaction of completed analysis. "Final reports on the fog incident are quite remarkable. Property crime actually decreased during those 3 nights. Apparently, when people can't see well, they become more cautious about activities that require clear visibility. Traffic accidents were down significantly, and citizen assistance calls to emergency services increased by 30%, not for help, but to offer help to others. Batman nodded, understanding that these statistics captured something important about human nature under pressure. When stripped of normal advantages and thrown into uncertainty, people's default response was often cooperation rather than competition. Nigma's assumption that fear would make people more controllable had been based on an incomplete understanding of how communities actually functioned. One more thing, Alfred added. The mayor's office has announced the formation of a new commission on urban acoustic planning, with Mr. Kellerman as its first consultant. They're calling it the Hidden Harmonies Initiative, a program to identify and preserve the city's accidentally created musical spaces. As Batman prepared to conclude this extended patrol, he took one final look at the fog-free cityscape spread out below him. Gotham looked both familiar and transformed. The same buildings and streets, but now carrying the memory of how different they could become under altered conditions. The experience had been a reminder that the city he protected was not a fixed entity, but a living system capable of endless variation and adaptation. In the end, he told Alfred as he headed toward home, Nigma taught us something valuable, though not what he intended. He showed us that Gotham contains possibilities we haven't discovered yet, resources and connections that only become visible when normal patterns are disrupted. A lesson worth learning, Alfred agreed, even if the teacher's motives were less than pure. In Gotham, as Batman had learned long ago, the most important mysteries often revealed themselves not to those who acted quickly, but to those who understood when to slow down and listen to voices that others might miss. Tonight, that wisdom had once again proven more valuable than any technology, more powerful than any individual genius, and more lasting than any fog that might temporarily obscure the truth. The acoustic discoveries throughout Gotham continued to reveal themselves in the weeks following the fog incident, but as autumn deepened toward winter, Batman found himself drawn to quieter investigations. The city's rhythm had shifted with the changing season, and even the criminal underworld seemed to move more slowly through the increasingly cold nights. It was during one of these peaceful patrols, 3 weeks after Nigma's capture, that Batman first noticed the lighthouse. Gotham's harbor had always been dotted with navigation aids, modern electronic beacons and automated systems that guided ships safely through the treacherous waters around the city. But on the northernmost point of Beacon Island, where the harbor met the deeper waters of the bay, stood something different. An old stone lighthouse that hadn't been operational in decades, its light replaced by more efficient modern systems. Tonight, however, as Batman completed his circuit through the waterfront district, he saw something impossible. The lighthouse was glowing, not with electric bulbs or LED arrays, but with the steady, warm light of what appeared to be an actual flame. The beacon swept across the dark waters with mechanical precision, its beam cutting through the crisp autumn air like something from another century. "Alfred," Batman subvocalized, pausing on a rooftop with clear sight lines to the harbor. "Are you seeing thermal readings from Beacon Island?" "Indeed, Master Bruce," came the immediate reply, Alfred's voice carrying concern. "The lighthouse is showing significant heat signatures, but according to city records, that structure has been abandoned since 1987. No power connections, no maintenance contracts, no legal occupancy permit." Batman studied the lighthouse through his cowl's enhanced optics. The building appeared to be in remarkable condition for something that had supposedly been neglected for decades. The stonework looked solid, the beacon housing intact, and most mysteriously, pale wisps of what might have been steam were visible around the base of the structure. "Steam in this weather suggests significant temperature differential," Batman observed. "Someone's not just occupying that lighthouse, They're heating it well above ambient temperature. Master Bruce! Alfred's voice carried a note of recognition, cross-referencing recent criminal activity with locations requiring significant heating or cooling systems. I believe we may have found where Dr. Victor Fries has established his latest laboratory. The name sent a chill through Batman that had nothing to do with the autumn air. Victor Fries, Mr. Freeze, was one of Gotham's most tragic and dangerous criminals, driven by an obsession with preserving his terminally ill wife through cryogenic suspension. His need for sub-zero working conditions made him easy to track when he was active, but finding his hidden bases required patience and careful observation of unusual thermal signatures. A lighthouse would provide perfect isolation for his experiments, Batman realized. Studying the structure's position, surrounded by water, accessible only by boat, and the beacon housing could easily conceal sophisticated cooling equipment while the heating systems maintain livable conditions in the lower levels. There's something else, Master Bruce, Alfred added thoughtfully. Maritime records show that Lighthouse was built with unusually thick stone walls, thermal insulation that would be perfect for maintaining precise temperature control. If Dr. Fries has indeed established himself there, he may have found the ideal environment for his cryogenic research. Batman prepared his cold weather equipment as he planned his approach to Beacon Island. After weeks of acoustic mysteries and fog-shrouded investigations, he was about to face a very different kind of challenge, one measured in degrees below freezing rather than riddles in the mist. The lighthouse beam continued its steady sweep across the harbor waters, a beacon that should have been guiding ships to safety but was now marking something far more dangerous. In its warm light, Batman could see his breath beginning to mist in the increasingly cold air, and he knew that whatever waited in that isolated tower would test more than just his detective skills. The transition from Nigma's intellectual games to Freeze's desperate science felt like stepping from one season into another, from the mysterious warmth of fog-muffled acoustics into the sharp clarity of winter's approach, where every breath was visible and every mistake could be measured in degrees of cold that could kill. Rain drummed against the windows of Wayne Manor with increasing intensity, each droplet catching the amber glow of study lamps before sliding into darkness. Alfred moved through the grand library with his customary quiet efficiency, adjusting curtains against the storm's growing fury. The power had flickered twice in the past hour, and across Gotham, neighborhoods were beginning to surrender to the blackout that followed in the storm's wake. Master Bruce, Alfred's voice carried the particular tone reserved for evenings when duty called louder than comfort. The reports are coming in from across the city. The electrical grid is failing sector by sector. Bruce Wayne looked up from the maritime charts spread across his desk, his attention shifting from historical shipping routes to the present crisis. Through the tall windows, lightning illuminated the city below, revealing patches of darkness spreading like ink across the urban landscape. Yet one light remained constant, a steady beacon pulsing from the old watchtower that had guided ships through Gotham's harbor since the city's founding. The watchtower is still operational, Bruce observed, reaching for the binoculars Alfred had quietly placed beside the charts. Through the lenses, the tower stood defiant against the storm, its light cutting through sheets of rain with mechanical precision. That's impossible. The harbor's power station went down an hour ago. Alfred moved closer to the window, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. Perhaps it has an independent power source. The old maritime structures were built for precisely such emergencies. But Bruce was already studying the beacon's pattern through the binoculars. The light wasn't following the standard lighthouse sequence. Instead, it pulsed in an irregular rhythm that seemed almost biological, like a heartbeat. or the firing pattern of neurons in a dying brain. "This isn't standard emergency protocol," he murmured, lowering the binoculars. "Someone's modified the system." The transition from Bruce Wayne to Batman happened with practiced efficiency. Alfred assisted with the familiar ritual of preparation, checking equipment and monitoring communication channels while the storm continued its assault on Gotham's infrastructure. The city's emergency services were overwhelmed, dealing with flooding and power outages throughout the metropolitan area. "The Batwing's systems are adapted for storm conditions," Alfred noted as Bruce made final adjustments to his cowl. "Though I suspect this particular investigation may require a more delicate approach than usual." Something in Alfred's tone suggested he understood the weight of what they were facing. The old watchtower had been decommissioned years ago, its navigational duties transferred to modern GPS systems and automated harbor control. Yet someone had gone to considerable trouble to keep its light burning through the storm, and that someone clearly possessed both the technical knowledge and resources to override citywide power failures. Batman's approach to the watchtower was necessarily cautious. The harbor district was treacherous in good weather, and the storm had turned familiar streets into... His grappling gun carried him from building to building, each swing requiring careful calculation as wind gusts threatened to throw him off course. The watchtower itself was a marvel of 19th century engineering, a graceful spiral of weathered stone and iron that had withstood more than a century of storms. Tonight, it stood like a monument to persistence, its beacons sweeping across the turbulent harbor with hypnotic. But as Batman drew closer, he could hear something that shouldn't have been possible. The hum of active machinery within the supposedly abandoned structure. His cowl's enhanced audio sensors filtered out the storm's chaos, focusing on the mechanical sounds emanating from within the tower. Cooling systems, powerful computers, and underneath it all a rhythmic pulsing that matched the beacon's irregular pattern, as if the entire structure had been transformed into some vast technological heart. The tower's main door had been reinforced with modern security systems, but they were bypassed with surgical precision rather than brute force. Someone had wanted to preserve the structure's integrity while adapting it for their purposes. Batman's examination of the locking mechanisms revealed work of exceptional quality. The modifications were nearly seamless, integrated with the original architecture so skillfully that they seemed to belong. Inside, the transformation was even more remarkable. The tower's historic interior had been preserved but enhanced with arrays of cryogenic equipment that hummed with quiet efficiency. Cables ran along the stone walls like technological ivy, connecting modern processors to the ancient beacon mechanism high above. The air was cold, not just from the storm, but from the deliberate climate control that kept the entire structure at precise temperatures. "Oracle," Batman sub-vocalized into his cowl's communication system. "I need identification on the equipment in the watchtower. Military-grade cryogenic systems, integrated with what appears to be neurological monitoring hardware." Analyzing, Oracle's voice came back through the encrypted channel. "The power consumption alone would require... Wait, I'm detecting a signature I recognize. The cryogenic configuration matches patents filed by Wayne Tech's Advanced Medical Division, but these systems were never approved for production." Batman paused his ascent, studying a particularly sophisticated cooling unit that hummed with barely contained power. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. Every component precisely calibrated, every connection sealed against the coastal moisture that would have destroyed lesser equipment. This wasn't the desperate improvisation of a madman, but the methodical work of a brilliant scientist, driven by love to transcend the boundaries of conventional medicine. "The integration is remarkable," Oracle continued. her analysis deepening. Whoever built this managed to interface experimental cryogenic preservation with active neurological monitoring. The computational requirements alone, Master Bruce, this represents years of development. Someone has been planning this for a very long time. The realization added weight to Batman's understanding of what he was witnessing. Victor hadn't constructed this facility in desperation after Nora's diagnosis. This was the culmination of a long campaign against death itself, waged with the patience and precision that had once made him one of the world's leading cryogenic researchers. Batman continued his ascent through the tower, following the cable pathways toward the beacon chamber. Each level revealed more sophisticated equipment, processors capable of handling massive data streams, storage systems designed for long-term biological preservation, and monitoring devices that suggested someone was tracking incredibly complex biological processes in real time. The air grew colder as he climbed, not just from the storm's influence but from the deliberate climate control that maintained optimal conditions for the delicate work being performed within these walls. On the third level, he discovered what appeared to be a workshop, a space where theoretical medical equipment had been transformed into functional reality. Workbenches held partially assembled components, technical drawings covered every available surface, and multiple computer terminals displayed cascading streams of biological data. This was where the impossible had been made possible, where love had driven innovation beyond the boundaries of accepted science. The neurological monitoring equipment, Oracle continued, her voice carrying a note of recognition. I've seen similar configurations in experimental medical facilities. This is life support technology, Master Bruce. Someone's maintaining biological functions artificially. Batman examined the technical drawings more closely, his cowl's enhanced vision capturing details that revealed the true scope of the project. These weren't just preservation systems. They were consciousness transfer protocols, methods for maintaining active brain function while the body was held in cryogenic suspension. The theoretical frameworks were decades ahead of anything he'd seen in Wayne Enterprises' own medical research divisions. Look at these power consumption calculations, Oracle noted, having accessed the workshop's computer systems remotely. The energy requirements increase exponentially over time. Whoever built this knew it wasn't a permanent solution. It was designed as a temporary bridge, buying time for some future breakthrough. The workshop also contained more personal elements that spoke to the human cost of this scientific achievement. Photographs of a woman with gentle eyes and an infectious smile were scattered among the technical documentation. Not just formal portraits, but candid moments of joy and intimacy. A handwritten note in feminine script was pinned to one wall. Victor, remember to eat actual meals, not just coffee and determination. Love, N. Batman realized he was looking at the visual record of a relationship that had survived the transition from normal life to desperate medical emergency. These weren't just the tools of a scientist trying to cheat death. They were the artifacts of a couple who had faced terminal illness together, who had chosen to fight the inevitable with every tool at their disposal. Master Bruce, Oracle's voice carried new urgency. I'm detecting significant power fluctuations throughout the building. The storm's electromagnetic activity is interfering with the electrical systems. Whatever's being maintained here, it's becoming increasingly unstable. The neurological monitoring equipment, Oracle continued, her voice carrying a note of recognition. I've seen similar configurations in experimental medical facilities. This is life support technology, Master Bruce. Someone's maintaining biological functions artificially. The realization struck him as he reached the tower's upper levels. The irregular beacon pattern wasn't random. It was synchronized with biological rhythms, brain activity, Someone was using the lighthouse beacon to mirror the neurological patterns of a living person, turning the entire structure into a massive medical monitoring device visible from across the harbor. "Victor," Batman said quietly, recognizing the precision and desperate ingenuity that could only belong to one man. "What have you done?" The beacon chamber itself was a merger of old and new that took Batman's breath away. The original lighthouse mechanism had been preserved, but enhanced with arrays of monitors and processors that transformed the space into something between a medical facility and a shrine. And to the center of it all, surrounded by the most sophisticated cryogenic equipment Batman had ever seen, was a containment unit that pulsed with the same rhythm as the beacon above. Dr. Victor Freeze stood with his back to the entrance, his distinctive cryosuit powered down to minimal levels. He didn't turn when Batman entered, but his shoulders tensed with the awareness that his solitude had been interrupted. "I wondered when you would come," Victor said, his voice carrying none of its usual mechanical distortion. Without the suit's full life support systems, he sounded almost human, tired, grieving, but undeniably human. "Though I had hoped for more time." "The beacon can be seen from across the city," Batman replied, moving carefully into the chamber. "In a blackout, it's going to draw attention." Victor finally turned, and Batman saw something he hadn't expected. Tears frozen on the man's cheeks, crystalline tracks that caught the light from the monitors surrounding them. "Let them come," he said quietly. "I have nowhere left to run. And she..." He gestured toward the containment unit. "She deserves better than hiding in shadows." Batman's enhanced vision analyzed the equipment surrounding them, and the readings made his heart sink. The containment unit wasn't just preserving biological tissue, it was maintaining active brain function through incredibly sophisticated life support systems. Neural patterns flowed across monitors in waves of data that represented someone's consciousness, artificially sustained at the moment between life and death. "Nora," Batman said, understanding flooding through him. "She's dying." Victor replied, his voice breaking. "Has been dying for months. The disease is winning despite everything I've tried. But her mind, her memories, her dreams, the way she laughs at my terrible jokes. I've found a way to preserve all of it, to hold on to her essence even as her body fails." The beacon above them pulsed in rhythm with the displays, each flash representing a moment of consciousness, a memory preserved in digital amber. Batman realized that the lighthouse wasn't just a medical facility. It was a monument to love, a desperate attempt to hold on to what mattered most in the face of inevitable loss. "The power requirements alone," Batman began, "are enormous," Victor admitted. "That's why I needed the watchtower. The structure's electrical systems were designed to be independent, powerful enough to maintain the beacon through any storm. I've enhanced them, yes, but the foundation was already there, built by people who understood that some lights must never be allowed to fail." Batman studied the readouts, his cowl's systems analyzing the medical data streaming across the displays. "Her brain activity is stable. You've actually managed to maintain full consciousness during the preservation process. For now," Victor said, moving to one of the monitoring stations. "But the equipment is breaking down. The storm's electromagnetic interference is causing system failures I can't repair fast enough. Each pulse of the beacon requires more power, and the city's grid failure means I'm running on reserves that won't last much longer." The terrible irony wasn't lost on Batman. Victor had chosen the lighthouse precisely because it was designed to operate independently during emergencies. But now, the very storm that had knocked out the city's power was threatening to destroy the systems keeping Nora's consciousness alive. "How long Batman asked quietly. Hours, maybe less. Victor's hands moved across the control interfaces with practiced precision, adjusting parameters and redistributing power loads. I've been working for weeks to find an alternative solution, but the technology doesn't exist. This is experimental work decades ahead of anything else in the field. Batman's detective mind was already analyzing the situation, looking for solutions that Victor's grief might have obscured. You said you used Wayne Tech components, the patents that were never approved for production. I borrowed them, Victor admitted, along with the engineer who designed them. Dr. Catherine Wells. She's been helping me refine the systems. Is she here? Victor shook his head. Safe, somewhere dry. She only comes when the technical work requires 2 people. Tonight she's monitoring remotely, trying to help me stabilize the power fluctuations from her apartment across the harbor. Batman activated his cowl's communication system. Oracle, I need you to reach out to Dr. Catherine Wells, former Wayne Tech engineer currently residing in the harbor district. Tell her Batman needs her expertise at the watchtower immediately. On it, Oracle replied. And Master Bruce? The storm's expected to intensify over the next few hours. Whatever you're planning, you'll need to move quickly. The next hour passed in a strange communion of purpose. Dr. Wells arrived by emergency boat, her grey hair plastered by rain, but her eyes bright with intellectual challenge. She took one look at the beacon's control systems and immediately began working alongside Victor to redistribute power loads and stabilize the fluctuating signals. The neural pattern storage is remarkable, she told Batman as she worked. I designed the original specifications for medical preservation, but Victor's implementation goes far beyond anything I imagined possible. He's not just maintaining biological functions. He's preserving personality, memory, the complete structure of consciousness. Batman watched the monitors, seeing the ebb and flow of data that represented a human mind in digital form. But it's not sustainable, not with current technology, Dr. Wells agreed. The power requirements increase exponentially as the biological systems deteriorate. We're maintaining artificial brain function at a level that would normally require an entire hospital's resources. Victor had been silent during their conversation, focused entirely on the delicate work of keeping Nora's system stable. But now he looked up from the controls, his face etched with exhaustion and despair. I know it's impossible, he said quietly. I've always known, but I couldn't let her go. Not when there was still a chance, however small, that someone might develop the technology to bring her back fully. You're not trying to bring her back, Batman realized. You're trying to say goodbye. Victor's nod was almost imperceptible. The beacon. Each pulse represents a memory we shared. I've been programming them in sequence, chronologically. Our first meeting, our wedding day, quiet evenings reading together, the day she was diagnosed. His voice broke. I wanted to experience them all one more time while she was still here to share them. The tragic beauty of the gesture struck Batman with unexpected force. Victor hadn't built a prison for his wife's consciousness. He'd created a shrine to their love, a way to honor their shared life before accepting the inevitable. The lighthouse beacon that had guided ships safely to harbor was now guiding 2 souls through the final stages of their journey together. How many memories are left? Batman asked. Victor consulted one of the displays. 17 more sequences. Then he gestured helplessly at the monitors showing Nora's brain activity. The system will shut down peacefully. She'll simply Go to sleep. Dr. Wells had been working steadily on the power distribution problems, but now she paused in her efforts. Victor, I think I can stabilize the systems long enough to complete the sequence, but it will require rerouting power from the beacon itself. The lighthouse will go dark. Then the harbor traffic, Victor began. We'll navigate by instruments, Batman interrupted. The Port Authority has been using electronic guidance systems for years. The beacon is ceremonial now, not essential. Victor looked out through the chamber's windows at the storm-lashed harbor. For more than a century, this light had guided ships safely home. Now it would guide his beloved wife to her final rest. Do it, he said quietly. The next few hours passed in a strange, solemn ritual. As Dr. Wells worked to stabilize the life support systems, the beacon's light grew dimmer, its power redirected to the delicate work of preserving consciousness. Victor narrated each memory as it played across the monitors. 17 moments of love and loss, joy and sorrow, the accumulated treasures of a life shared. Batman found himself drawn into the intimate farewell despite himself. Through the neural interface, he could see fragments of the memories. Nora's laughter echoing through their small apartment as Victor attempted to cook dinner and somehow managed to set off the smoke alarm. Her gentle criticism of his tendency toward obsession, delivered with the affection of someone who loved him precisely because of his passionate dedication. Her courage in the face of diagnosis, insisting that they would face whatever came together. Her insistence that he promised to find happiness after she was gone, a promise he had struggled to make and found impossible to keep. The third sequence, Victor said softly as new data flowed across the displays. Our first Christmas together. She insisted on buying a tree, even though our apartment was barely large enough for both of us, let alone holiday decorations. His voice carried the warmth of treasured recollection. She said that small spaces just meant the joy was more concentrated. Batman watched the neural patterns shift and flow, seeing the electrical representation of love made manifest in brain chemistry. The memory was beautiful in its simplicity. Two people choosing to create celebration despite limited resources, finding abundance in their commitment to each other. She was right, you know, Dr. Wells said quietly, not looking up from her delicate work with the power systems. Small spaces do concentrate joy. It's one of the things I learned working on consciousness preservation. Happiness isn't diminished by constraints. Sometimes it's amplified by them. The fourth memory began to play. A quiet evening when Nora had fallen asleep reading while Victor worked late in his laboratory. He had found her hours later, still curled in his chair with a book open on her chest, and had simply sat watching her breathe, memorizing every detail of her peaceful expression. I knew even then that I wanted to remember that moment forever, Victor said, his voice breaking slightly. The way the lamplight caught her hair, the tiny smile she got when she dreamed, the complete trust in her posture. I didn't know then that I would have the technology to preserve it exactly as it happened. Hey, Horace. She's beautiful, Batman said as the memory sequence continued, showing Victor's perspective as he had covered Nora with a blanket and turned off her reading light. The simple domestic intimacy of a man caring for the woman he loved. She is, Victor agreed, his voice barely audible over the storm. Even now, even like this, she's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. The final memory sequence began, not the quiet reading scene Batman had initially observed, but something even more profound. It was the moment of Nora's diagnosis, but seen through the lens of memory, it had been transformed into something luminous rather than devastating. The scene showed Victor and Nora sitting in a sterile doctor's office, holding hands as they received news that would change everything. But instead of focusing on the fear or grief, the memory captured Nora's immediate response. She had squeezed Victor's hand and said, Well, then we'd better make every moment count, hadn't we? That was when I knew, Victor said, watching the neural patterns that represented his wife's extraordinary courage. Not just that I loved her, but that she was going to teach me how to love properly, how to hold onto what mattered without letting fear consume it. The memory continued, showing the couple walking home from the appointment, their conversation a mixture of practical planning and profound acceptance. Nora had insisted on stopping at their favorite cafe, ordering the most expensive dessert on the menu and eating it slowly, savoring each bite as if it were a small act of defiance against mortality. She said that if time was going to be limited, we should make sure we tasted it properly, Victor explained, his hand still pressed against the containment unit. Every moment, every sensation, every shared experience should be appreciated for what it was. A gift that we were lucky to receive, even if we couldn't keep it forever. Batman understood now why this final memory held such significance. It wasn't just a moment of love, but a lesson in how to love, how to embrace precious things without being paralyzed by the knowledge of their impermanence. Nora had faced her mortality with grace, and had used that grace to teach Victor how to do the same. The memory sequence ended, and the monitors began showing the gradual decrease in neural activity as the life support systems gently shut down. It was peaceful, dignified, exactly what Victor had hoped for. The woman he loved was simply going to sleep, surrounded by technology that preserved her consciousness until the very last moment, held by memories that would outlast any machine. The beacon gave one final, brilliant flash, a lighthouse's last gift to the harbor it had protected for so long. Then the chamber fell into darkness, lit only by the soft glow of medical monitors and the distant lightning outside, as if the storm itself was offering a gentle farewell to the love that had burned so brightly within these walls. "It's finished," Dr. Wells said quietly, her instruments confirming what they all knew. "She's at peace." Victor remained motionless beside the containment unit, one gloved hand pressed against its surface. Batman expected him to collapse, to rage against the finality of loss. But instead, the man seemed to grow calmer, more centered than Batman had ever seen him. "Thank you," Victor said, addressing both Dr. Wells and Batman, "for letting me do this properly, for giving her the farewell she deserved." "What will you do now?" Batman asked. Victor was quiet for a long moment, listening to the storm beginning to subside outside. "I don't know," he admitted. "For so long, everything I did was for her, to save her, to preserve her, to hold on to what we had. Now," he looked around the chamber that had been their final sanctuary, "now I need to learn how to live with beautiful memories instead of desperate hope." Dr. Wells began shutting down the remaining systems with careful precision, preserving the data while powering down the equipment. "The neural pattern recordings are intact," she told Victor. "If you ever want to review them, to remember—" "I'll remember," Victor said simply. "I don't need machines for that anymore." As dawn broke over Gotham Harbor, the storm finally began to clear. The watchtower stood silent and dark. Its long watch ended. Batman prepared to depart, but Victor's voice stopped him. "There's someone you should know about," Victor said. "An old dock worker named Sam Briggs. He's been coming to the harbor every night for months, just to watch the beacon. I think he was drawing hope from the light somehow." Batman nodded, understanding. In a city as dark as Gotham, any persistent light became a symbol of hope, regardless of its original purpose. "I'll make sure he's looked after." The journey back to Wayne Manor was quiet. the city slowly coming back to life as power was restored neighborhood by neighborhood. Batman found himself taking a longer route through the harbor district, drawn by an impulse he couldn't quite name. The storm had left the streets gleaming with reflected light, and the air carried the clean scent of rain-washed stone and sea salt. Near the old pier where fishing boats bobbed at anchor, he spotted a figure standing alone despite the early hour. An elderly man in a worn pea coat stood facing the watchtower, hands deep in his pockets, shoulders set with the patient stance of someone accustomed to long vigils. This had to be Sam Briggs, the dock worker Victor had mentioned. Batman approached with careful silence, but the man turned at his approach without surprise. Sam's weathered face showed no fear at the Dark Knight's presence, only a kind of resigned curiosity. "Figured you might show up," Sam said in a voice roughened by decades of harbor work. "Been watching that tower for 8 months now. Noticed when the light changed tonight, got dimmer, then went out completely. Something important happened up there, didn't it?" "Why did you come here every night?" Batman asked, genuinely curious about this man who had unknowingly shared Victor's vigil. Sam was quiet for a moment, his eyes fixed on the dark tower. "Lost my wife 3 years ago," he said finally. "Cancer. The doctors, they did everything they could, but..." He shrugged, with the helplessness of someone who had learned that love couldn't conquer everything. "After she died, I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about how dark the world felt without her light in it." Batman listened, understanding more than the old man could know about the particular darkness that followed profound loss. "Then one night, walking off the insomnia, I noticed that beacon up there, burning steady through a storm, much like tonight's," Sam continued. "Something about it, I don't know, made me feel less alone, like someone else was keeping watch, you know, maintaining something important through the dark hours." "You never questioned why it stayed lit when everything else went dark?" Sam smiled, expression both sad and knowing. "In my experience, the lights that matter most don't always make logical sense. They burn because someone needs them to burn. Tonight, watching it fade out gradual-like instead of just going dead, well, that seemed peaceful somehow, like it finished what it was meant to do." Batman found himself profoundly moved by the old dock worker's instinctive understanding. Without knowing the tower's true purpose, Sam had recognized its function as a beacon of hope, a light maintained through love's long watch. "What will you do now that it's dark? Keep coming, I expect," Sam replied, with characteristic harbor pragmatism. "Place like this, it holds on to meaning even when the light's not showing. Besides," he added with a slight smile, "I got a feeling that beacon's not done burning. Just resting, maybe." Alfred was waiting with hot coffee and the morning papers when Batman finally returned to Wayne Manor, but Bruce found himself drawn to the study windows, looking out toward the harbor where the watchtower stood in peaceful darkness. "Master Bruce?" Alfred's voice carried gentle inquiry. "I watched a man say goodbye tonight," Bruce replied, accepting the offered coffee gratefully. "Real goodbye, not the kind where you tell yourself it's temporary." Alfred joined him at the window, following his gaze toward the distant tower. "And how did that feel?" Bruce considered the question, thinking of Victor's terrible calm, the dignity with which he'd let his beloved go. "Like something I need to learn how to do." The harbor was busy with morning traffic, ships navigating by electronic instruments as they had for years. The watchtower's beacon was no longer needed for its original purpose, but Batman found himself thinking about the old dock worker Victor had mentioned, Sam Briggs, who had drawn hope from the light without knowing its true purpose. "Alfred," Bruce said quietly, "I want you to arrange for the watchtower to be restored. not as a cryogenic facility but as a proper lighthouse. The city should maintain the beacon. For navigation purposes, Master Bruce? For hope, Bruce replied. Sometimes people need to see a light that doesn't go out, even if they don't know why it's burning. Later that morning, Bruce Wayne would announce the Wayne Foundation's commitment to preserving Gotham's maritime heritage, including the restoration of the historic watchtower. But the restoration would be different from what anyone expected. More than just rebuilding the beacon, it would honor the tower's recent history in subtle ways. Working with Dr. Wells, who had volunteered her expertise without compensation, the Foundation would create a memorial archive within the tower's lower levels. Not a museum of Victor and Nora's story, that remained private, sacred, but a broader celebration of love's persistence in the face of the space would house the stories of Gotham's harbor workers, their families, the generations of lighthouse keepers who had maintained the beacon through storms and wars. Victor himself would contribute to this effort, though few would know his involvement. The neurological monitoring equipment would be removed, but the tower's enhanced power systems would remain, allowing the beacon to burn with unprecedented reliability. In quiet moments, standing in the memorial space, Victor would sometimes think he could hear the echo of Nora's laughter and the sound of wind through the tower's restored mechanisms. The beacon would burn again within a month, its light visible from across the harbor, a reminder that some flames are worth keeping alive, not for their practical purpose, but for what they represent to those who need to believe in persistence, in the possibility that important things in Sam Briggs would return to his nightly vigil when the beacon was restored. But he wouldn't be alone. Word of the old dock workers' faithful watch spread quietly through the harbor community, and others began joining him on difficult nights. Widows and widowers, those grieving children or parents, anyone who needed to share the comfort of a light that refused to surrender to darkness. They rarely spoke, these midnight watchers, but their presence created a communion of understanding that none of them had found elsewhere. Dr. Catherine Wells would publish papers on consciousness preservation that would advance medical science by decades, but she would never discuss the most profound discovery of her work with Victor, that love itself could be measured, quantified in the patterns of neural activity that persisted even at the moment of death, in the way two minds could synchronize across the boundary between life and memory. Victor Fries would face each new day with the knowledge that he had honored his wife's memory properly, completely, and with a love that had transcended even death itself. The cryogenic suit would be stored away, no longer necessary for his survival. The desperate cold that had driven him for so long finally warmed by the peace of acceptance. He would find work again, quietly, helping other scientists understand the delicate boundary between preservation and letting go. But that morning, as the storm clouds cleared and normal life resumed in Gotham, Batman stood at his window, thinking about the difference between holding on and letting go, between hope and desperation, between the love that preserves and the love that liberates. The conversation with Sam Briggs had added another layer to his understanding, how the light meant to guide one soul's journey could inadvertently become a beacon for others who needed to believe that someone, somewhere, was maintaining vigil against the darkness. Alfred joined him at the window, carrying a second cup of coffee with the unconscious grace of decades of shared morning rituals. "I spoke with Commissioner Gordon while you were returning," he said quietly. "The power grid is fully restored and there were no casualties from the storm beyond minor property damage. It seems Gotham weathered this particular darkness well. Some darkness is necessary," Bruce replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. Victor needed to pass through it to reach the other side. And what of you, Master Bruce? What did you learn in that tower? Bruce considered the question, watching the harbor traffic resume its normal patterns. That there's a difference between preserving something and honoring it. Victor spent months trying to preserve Nora's consciousness, but what he really needed was to honor their love. By letting her go with dignity, Alfred nodded with the understanding of someone who had seen Bruce struggle with similar questions for years. The distinction is perhaps more subtle than it appears. Love that holds on too tightly can become its own prison. The memories in those neural patterns, they weren't just Nora's anymore. They were theirs, together. By experiencing them one final time, Victor wasn't just saying goodbye to her. He was completing their story properly. In the harbor, the watchtower stood peaceful and dark, its long night's work complete. A monument to the idea that some lights burn brightest just before they're meant to go out, and that the darkness that follows isn't emptiness, but peace. The beacon would shine again, but its most important light, the one that had guided two souls through their final journey together, had served its purpose and could finally rest. In a city that never slept, that never stopped fighting against the darkness, there was something profound about witnessing a battle that ended not in victory or defeat, but in acceptance, dignity, and the quiet triumph of love that knows when to hold on and when to let go. As the morning sun climbed higher over Gotham, Batman finally left his vigil at the window, carrying with him the memory of light persisting through the storm, of love that endured even in its own ending, and of the strange peace that came from watching someone say goodbye with grace. The watchtower stood empty now, but not abandoned, transformed from a place of desperate preservation into a symbol of eternal hope. Its future beacon destined to guide not just ships to harbor, but souls toward the understanding that some lights are worth maintaining, simply because they prove that darkness, no matter how deep, is never permanent. In the harbor, morning traffic moved efficiently under clear skies, captains navigating by instruments and experience. But when the watchtower's beacon returned, they would welcome it not because they needed its guidance, but because some lights are valuable not for their necessity, but for their persistence, their refusal to surrender to the darkness, their quiet promise that hope, like love, endures long after its practical purpose has been served. And in a city like Gotham, that promise was worth more than all the technology in the world. And so our tale of Gotham comes to an end. Let the gentle night embrace you as you drift toward peaceful dreams, knowing that somewhere in the darkness, the Dark Knight watches over his city. If you're not asleep yet, we will now play the ambience of Gotham City at night to help you fall asleep. And if you were just listening to our tales, we will see you next time. Good night and sleep well,